The Minnesota Vikings have brought joy and misery to the Vikings fans for many years. At the Skol Purple Podcast, we just want to see the Vikings party with the Lombardi. Join us for analysis, interviews, laughs, and much more. It's the podcast by Vikings fans for Vikings fans. The Skol Purple Podcast starts now. Here's your host, the one, the only, Steggie.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Skol Purple Podcast. As always, my name is Tony Stegeman, a.k.a. Steggie. We are very excited to have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Paul Dottino. Hopefully, I didn't butcher your last name, Paul. Super excited to have you. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Not a problem. Some people call me Patino as if I was related to the world-famous NCAA college basketball coach, but that is not the case at all.
Yeah, the Patino family, we're pretty familiar with them here in Minnesota. We had his
I know
son.
you are.
Yeah, his son coached here for a little while, and the fan base is pretty divided on his son's tenure here with the Gophers. But we'll leave that for another podcast, of course. But here we are. It is Monday after Week 18. Both of our teams staring at the playoffs and each other here as we approach this weekend. I know I'm very excited about this weekend, Paul. But I did want to ask you about your club and then maybe some of the items that you're looking at this weekend. What I'm going to kind of kick us off with is just your thoughts on the Giants' year. How do you feel like this last season has been? Obviously, 9-7-1 with that last loss, really kind of meaning nothing when they trotted out the B squad this last week. But do you feel like it was a success?
Oh, there's no question about that. I think most of your mathematical, economic experts, if you will, they figure the Giants for 6.5, and they've won 9. I personally thought they'd be an 8-9 team, and with the possible addition of maybe 2 wins, give or take, I thought their max was 10, and I did think that they might sniff the playoffs. So they're not far off of my expectations, but as you know, the media in New York tends to be very downtrodden and very negative. And so most of the media in this town really didn't think the Giants had any chance of being a playoff team whatsoever. But I had tremendous faith in the bounce back years of Saquon Barkley and of Daniel Jones, with Brian Dable coming in, an offensive genius. Mike Kafka also coming over as the offensive coordinator from Kansas City. Dable, obviously, from Buffalo. And Wake Martindale's the defensive coordinator coming in from Baltimore. Those 3 guys, those 2 coordinators and that head coach, gave me a lot of reason to believe that the Giants could possibly sniff a playoff spot. So they're not that far off where I thought they would be. And to be frank with you, the only thing that I'm surprised about is that they were able to sustain so many injuries and still reach a 9-win season. Because when I predicted 8 with a max of 10, I said, well, 10 if everything goes right, including their health. Well, their health went in the toilet. I mean, they suffered tremendous losses, specifically on defense and at wide receiver. And quite frankly, even the offensive line was dinged up for a good part of the season. And yet somehow they pieced it all together because this coaching staff has been outstanding from top to bottom. And Joe Shane, the first-year GM coming over from Buffalo, also deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Him and his personnel department bringing in so many guys on the depth chart who were either rookies or they were veterans who had been discarded by other teams, and the Giants said, no, there's more juice in this orange, and all of those guys collectively helped the Giants get to 9 wins.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be honest, from an outsider perspective, I don't think I had the Giants going, more than, like you said, maybe 8-9 wins on the season. That's about where I would have put them. So I suppose, with them getting to 9 there, that I suppose they met that. But certainly I would not have been surprised if they would have had, a bit more of a down season, especially if, like you mentioned, the injury bug hits, the health becomes an issue. Certainly if Barkley can't bounce back and Daniel Jones doesn't seem to blossom under Dable like I think many hoped. And so, Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I certainly look at it as a successful season for the Giants. I certainly look at the Vikings season as a successful season. I would not have picked the Vikings to be at 13 wins. My prediction for them was similar to your prediction for your club. I had them at anywhere between 8 to about 11 wins, somewhere in there. And but on the flip side, I also had the Packers at about 9 to about 12 wins. I figured they'd be right about where the Vikings were at. So we got a little help there with winning the division, but 13 wins, I'll take it any year. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, the
Next,
Packers, the Buccaneers, and the Rams, I think, all share the mantle of being like the most disappointing NFC teams this year.
yeah,
And so you saw a little bit of a flip flopping in terms of the power teams of the conference. We saw three of them, take significant stumbles, and that opened the door for a team like the Giants.
yeah. Well, then you've got the NFC East. I mean, I don't know if I certainly would not have predicted the NFC East being as strong as it was this year. At one point in time, you had the Eagles, Dallas, and the Giants staring at essentially high seeds in their own right. I mean, I know that's not exactly how
Yeah.
they seed the playoffs, but at one point in time, you were talking about the cream of the crop of the NFC, and it was all in one division. So it
Yes.
was quite the interesting year for the NFC East. Obviously, we'll see how things shake out in the playoffs. Very excited about what's going to happen this weekend, just to see again how our clubs stack up. Before we go into maybe this weekend, I do have a couple teaser questions about your club because as us that look from the outside, we're trying to diagnose what other teams are doing, what's on the horizon, and then kind of what we're doing internally. One of the things about the Vikings that we ask ourselves every year, especially in the last, let's say, 3, 4 years, is what are we going to do at the quarterback position? It's going to be the same conversation this year. Kirk Cousins has had a fantastic season, but unless we're talking Super Bowl, which, if I'm being honest, as a Vikings fan, I think it'd be great, but I think it's a little unrealistic. That question has to be asked. And I would say, as a Giants fan, kind of a similar question. Is Daniel Jones still the long term answer? Do you feel like Dable has done enough to, kind of ignite that progression? I think we've seen some of it, but where do you stand on Daniel Jones and his future with the Giants? Obviously, not from a personnel perspective, but where do you see his growth?
Well, my logical assessment back at Halloween at the end of October is that the Giants had seen enough, and Daniel Jones would probably get a 4-year extension by at the end of the season. I haven't moved off of that once. The only box that Jones had not checked by that point was durability, because he had missed at least a game in each of his first 3 NFL seasons. And so this year, as they got to the midpoint and it was clear that he was going to be the guy, well, could he stay on the field? That's the one question they had to answer. Everything else, he checked every other box. And I think the Giants front office had already decided that. And so I do think he's going to get that deal. I don't know exactly what date it'll come down, but I think it's going to work out for him. He has improved his accuracy. He has improved his escapability and ability to throw on the move. He has been much smarter with his decision making as to when to run with the ball. He's improved his toughness and durability. He has dramatically improved his turnover ratio in terms of lowering his interception rate to where he's the lowest percentage interception quarterback in the league. He has lowered his fumbleitis quotient, which when he got into the league, he had turnover issues not only with picks, but also with fumbles. And now he's doing a sensational job of not only keeping the ball out of the defense's hands on passes, but also holding on to the ball when he gets hurt. There's nothing that Daniel Jones hasn't improved this year. And Brian Daboll is clearly a big reason behind that. Daniel Jones, to me, I don't think there's any doubt he's in the second quartile of the National Football League. If you break the 32 starters down into eights, go 1 to 8, 9 to 16, 17 to, so forth and so on into quartiles, he's in the second quartile. He's somewhere between 9 and 16. You can argue what number you want to put him at, but he's in the second quartile. And I think the Giants believe that. and I think they'll be very happy to resign him. As far as Kirk Cousins, I'll tell you this: you have a reason to be upset because to me, he's looking very much like his career is going to be Philip Rivers. Going to put up great fantasy numbers. You're going to love his regular season one-loss record and all he does for your fantasy team, but he's never going to get you a championship. And that's one of the reasons why Washington let him go.
Yeah. Well, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, as a fan of the team, and certainly as long as he's wearing a purple jersey, we're gonna hope that he can get over that hump. Certainly, he's won some big games. We have a couple of playoff victories with Kirk, notable one being over the Saints a few years back. But time and time again, the pattern has generally been that he can't win big games. Generally speaking, if it's not a noon game or one game, if you're on the East Coast, he struggles. And I think the biggest area of concern with me with Cousins is when he gets pressured, when things go
No
off
doubt.
script, he doesn't have the ability uh, to work on the fly. And, where you see some of the greats, such as, of course, an Aaron Rodgers, a Drew Brees, a Tom Brady, when things go off script, they're able to, again, roll with whatever they're given and identify, the proper route, the proper reads quickly. I just don't think Cousins has that gear. So if you've got a fantastic offensive line, I think he could be, a top tier quarterback. I just think without it, he needs quite a bit of help. So we'll
Yeah,
certainly see
yeah.
how.
It's all about when he plays the elite of the league in the postseason or in really big games against elite defenses, guys who have really strong pass rushers, or for that matter, really crafty defensive coordinators. Those are the ones who are going to have the most success against him. And you know what? That's okay. He's had a great career. He's made a ton of money. He's won a lot of games and put up wonderful numbers and given people a lot of thrills. There's nothing wrong with that. Heck, Philip Rivers is going to wind up in Canton. He's going to the Hall of Fame and he'll get a Hall of Fame jacket. But you can forget about the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah. I have a quick question for you. I posed this on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and I said, on the off chance that Kirk Cousins finds a way to win a Super Bowl, is he in Hall of Fame conversation?
Yeah, he probably would at least be in the conversation. I mean, his numbers have been ridiculous. He probably would be. I haven't studied his numbers enough to know how much more he needs to do. But like I said, Rivers is going in, and how many great quarterbacks put up phenomenal numbers like Dan Fouts, Dan Marino. There is a proclivity to love the numbers when it comes time to start voting for Hall of Fame. And I just think it's a damn shame. You got a guy like Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger who each won 2 Super Bowls. To me, hands down, I'd take either one of those guys over Philip Rivers 7 days and then twice on Sunday. But Philip Rivers had some pretty gaudy stats, and I'm sure that he'll go in there with the other two.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great observation and probably a great point. As far as Barkley, now to my second point, the other low hanging fruit for all of us non Giants fans out there. Obviously, Barkley looks to be an unrestricted free agent after this year, unless I got my information wrong. What do the Giants do with Barkley? Obviously, he comes back, has a relatively healthy season. I mean, obviously, running backs always get nicked up throughout the year. That's to be expected. But compared to years past, he's certainly been solid. I would say, from a numbers perspective, especially for the first half of the season, he looked like the Barkley of old. What do the Giants do going into next season with Barkley?
I think Barkley's going to get between a 3 and 5 year deal, with the fourth and fifth years kind of being paper years potentially. And if they can't come to an agreement with him, they'll stick him with the 1 year franchise tag at a little bit over 10 million next year. So you can expect to see Barkley and Jones in the backfield for the Giants in September.
Well, that's a great segue because Barkley, I believe it was today, said he was looking forward to seeing the Vikings again this weekend. So, what are we looking for this weekend? As a Giants fan, somebody that's followed this team very closely, what are you looking forward to this weekend? Maybe what are you looking for from your own squad as they prepare for the Vikings this weekend?
Well, if you look at the NFC, it's quite clear to me right now San Francisco's at the top of the power rankings. Philadelphia was for most of the year. Then San Fran traded for McCaffrey. And to me, that made them solid at number 2, even though their quarterbacks have been injured and they've gone through 3 of them. And now I think right now, San Fran's number 1. After San Fran, I would probably slot Philadelphia. And after that, I'm not even sure who the number 3 team right now is in the National Football Conference. I'm really not, because I think there's that much of a moat or a gap between those 2 teams and the rest of the NFC. I truly believe that any of the other playoff teams, the other 5 remaining playoff teams, could beat each other on any given Sunday. I really believe that. And I know the Giants can beat the Vikings. We saw what happened a couple of weeks ago. The Vikings, I thought, played probably an A to A- game. I don't think they can play much better than that. The Giants totally outplayed them that day, and they had the unforeseen issues of Leonard Williams got hurt in the game, which was a big part of their defensive line. Ojulari got hurt in the game, edge rusher. And when you take those 2 guys out, it actually gives Cousins a sporting chance to do something. Giants didn't have Adoree Jackson in the secondary to guard Jefferson. They didn't have Xavier McKinney at safety to help keep Hawkinson down. I mean, to be quite frank with you, again, the Giants outplayed Minnesota. There were a couple of turnovers. The Giants had an unfortunate fumble deep in Minnesota territory by Bellinger. They had 2 drop first down passes in positive territory by Richie James. I mean, I could give you a laundry list of how the Giants actually got very sloppy and allowed the Vikings to have that game on a 61-yard field goal on the final play. Between the 2 teams, I'm sure Minnesota was much happier with their game than the Giants were, and it still took a 61-yard field goal on the final play. By the way, after a catch by Jefferson, during which there was an obvious holding penalty on Thibodeau, who had an opportunity to make the tackle but was being held, had his hands up showing the referee after he got held, and there was no call, and that allowed the field goal to take place in the first place. So, to me, I think the Giants should be favored in this game. As long as they play their A game, they'll get to the second round.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the matchup. I'm obviously, as a Vikings fan, I'm always a little scared. Vikings fans, we're very timid fans. We don't have a lot of confidence most years. It took me until about week 14 of the 2009 season to feel really good about that team. To give you an idea of how shell shocked Vikings fans can be, I can guarantee that most fans, at least most realistic fans, are probably going into this weekend's game thinking there's a good chance we might lose. Because to your point, week 16 wasn't that long ago. The Giants, you can think whatever you want, say whatever you want. Where they have struggled this year has been on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, they've had flashes at times, but maybe that offensive consistency, where they, maybe had the run game that got shut down. Can they do something in the passing game? The Vikings' weakness is by far that defense. The defense is, I've said it for at least half the season, we're about as strong as a wet paper napkin. They'll make anybody look like, Patty Mahomes. So Daniel Jones certainly looked the part. He looked like a Pro Bowl quarterback in week 16. I do not anticipate him struggling too much again this weekend. So it's really going to come down to what team is willing to keep their foot on the gas and doesn't make the mistakes. That's what
Well,
it's
look
going
at
to
it
come
this
down.
way. To me, I look at this. The Vikings play a lot of zone defense, and they don't blitz a lot. Okay? Daniel Jones loves that. He loves zone defenses. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why the Giants had nearly 450 yards of offense the last time they went out to Minneapolis. All right? What he did, I could see him doing something very similar to that. I really do. I don't see how Minnesota adjusts and does a better job. I mean, they even got that that really good job out of their defensive front when Hunter had a couple of sacks and a forced fumble. I mean, they did get to Jones, right? I mean, they got, I think, 3 sacks on the day and had almost 10 quarterback hits, but he still shredded them like Swiss cheese. So I don't know that they're going to be able to do any better. And on the other side of the ball, I just told you why the Giants' pass rush is going to be better, and their secondary is going to be better. Jefferson and Hawkinson are not going to have the room that they had 2 weeks ago, now that this Giants secondary is getting healthy. And Cousins, who I guess suffered 4 sacks in that game, and I think 11 quarterback hits, that's nothing compared to what Leonard Williams and Ojulari are going to add to this Giants defensive front. Look, we know from watching what happened with the Vikings this year, which teams gave them the biggest trouble on defense. Dallas, Philadelphia, the Giants. Why? Because they've got big, rugged, tough pass rushing defensive lines. That's the whole secret to short circuiting the Vikings. This is a matchup that really works well in the Giants' favor because styles make fights, matchups provide all the magic that you want in a given playoff game. It's not about who's got the better team. It's not about who's got the most raw talent. It's about the matchups. And the Vikings have a big problem here because who's in the NFC playoffs? The Giants, Dallas, Philadelphia, San Francisco. What do all 4 of those teams have? Big, nasty fronts that have outstanding pass rushing capability. And with Wink Martindale, it's not about one guy. Look at this. The Giants, I'll give you an example. Giants have Dexter Lawrence with 7.5 sacks. He led them in sacks this year. But that's not the important number, okay? Giants have 41 sacks this year, 13th in the league, so they're middle of the pack. But where are they not middle of the pack? They blitz more than anybody else, 36%. They got a 23% pressure ratio, which is quarterback hits, quarterback knockdowns, and sacks. 23% of the time, they get one of those 3 things. Cousins doesn't like that. Giants were 5th in the NFL in defense in the pressure number. And they're 8th in the NFL with 106 quarterback hits. Cousins will feel those guys time and time again. All 4 of those teams I just mentioned, the Vikings, I don't think want any part of any one of those teams.
Yeah, and it's not going to get any easier this weekend, Paul, because if you don't know, our offensive line is in shambles. We suffered a
Yeah.
couple of big blows to our offensive line in the last couple weeks. We're down to our 3rd string center. Now our, arguably Pro Bowl right tackle, he's out for the season. It's not looking good. About 40% of that line is on IR. And then, we've got a rookie who has looked serviceable towards the end of the year, but pretty rough for most of the year. It's gonna be a test. I agree that this game will be won and lost most likely in the trenches. I'm just thinking maybe what we need to do, Paul, is open those big glass doors. Maybe get some of that cold wind whipping in. Get a little of that Bud Grant, style of play going again. I don't know.
Well, here's if you're the Vikings, here's what you want to hope for, okay? That the Giants don't bring their A game, okay? Like they didn't do a couple of weeks ago. They didn't bring their A game. And that's how Minnesota prevailed and escaped, okay? Giants on the season had something like 40 drop passes by my tape study. I don't believe in some of these analytics services. They don't grade very well. My grades are tough. The Giants had 0 drops the other day against Philly, and I think it was the first time all year they didn't have a drop pass, okay? So the Giants do have a drop pass epidemic. That does hurt Daniel Jones. That could be one way because the Giants have a tendency to drop passes that would have gone for first downs and kept drives alive. So that's one way the Vikings can help short circuit the Giants. Another way, Giants are not very good on special teams. They've been inconsistent all year long, and they had a punt block by Minnesota, which set up an easy touchdown, if you recall, just a couple of weeks ago. That's a big deal. That may be an area the Vikings can exploit. Also, almost every week, the Giants give up a big return in the return game. whether it's a kickoff return or a punt return, it's almost maybe 2 weeks out of every 3. And that tilts the field and makes things more difficult on the entire team. Those are the things that you need to look for. And then also, I should add, in that game 2 weeks ago, Giants had 7 penalties, a couple which were very critical. Minnesota only had 2 that day. I told you, I thought it was kind of sketchy officiating. Well, the flags could also do a big favor for the Vikings in this game. Those are the things, if you're Minnesota, those are the things you have to have fall on your side if you're going to try to escape with a win.
Well, Paul, you are our special guest week, so I'm going to pitch it over or punt it over to you. What's your prediction for this week? And I have a feeling I know where you're going to go. You don't have to give me a score if you don't want to, but how are you feeling about your Giants' chances this weekend?
Well, it's very hard for me not to pick the Giants after everything we just talked about. It's a matchup league. I mean, that's what this is about. I didn't say the Giants are a better team. I didn't say they have more talent. What I'm telling you is the matchup. The matchup fits. If you have a square peg and you put it in a square hole, your puzzle is complete. That's the deal with the Giants. They play their game. They play clean. They'll win the game. Score-wise, I don't know. They'll probably have to still score about 30 points. I mean, it was 27-24, right? The last game a couple weeks back. They may need to score the 27 or the 28 points or even the 30 points to win this one. But I don't think that's something that they're going to be incapable of. I mean, again, almost 450 yards a couple of weeks back. I think they can do that.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game. I would agree. I think this game will not be whatever the over and under is, I suppose I could look it up. I would say it's probably going to go over. The points will be
Well, it won't
scored
be
in
a
this game.
17-14 game. I think we both know that.
This is true. I think the Vikings, the opening line is Vikings by 3, but they got the home advantage, whatever that means for somebody. So, I'm going to say, if I'm going to give a prediction for this week, of course, I'd love to take the Vikings. I am going to take the Vikings because I do believe it's going to be close. I don't think either team will run away with this game unless there's a lot of unforced errors like we saw in the Indianapolis game with the Vikings, like we saw at the beginning of the Green Bay game with the Vikings. It seems like this team is either built to win by 3 to 6 points or to lose by 28 or more. So, unless the Vikings start giving the ball away, there's fumbles, there's interceptions, maybe a run back of a kickoff or a punt return for a touchdown. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to take my Vikings, but boy, I think it's going to be close. I'm excited. Paul, I know you're excited as well. Before we finish up the episode today, though, Paul, where can everybody find you and all of your incredible media that you have out there?
Well, you guys can always look for me on MSG Networks. If you've got a cable or satellite package, that's the New York Regional Sports Channel of choice here in the Northeast. On Twitter at Giants WFAN. And of course, we have a reach on our WFAN 660 signal on the AM dial that goes at least around half of the country. So I'm part of the Giants official broadcast team as well, pre and post game and all that fun stuff. So it's busy. It's great. It's fun. Love being in it. The atmosphere in Minnesota for a game in that incredible building is so much fun. It is electric. It is deserving of a playoff game. It will make the Sunday feel exactly as it should, like it's alive. I love postseason games when the building feels like it's alive. And that's what's going to happen Sunday. And for that, I'm very, very glad that this is the matchup because it should be a tremendous amount of fun.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it, Paul. Again, thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe to us here at the Skol Purple Podcast. Of course, you can follow us on all of our social media on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, MySpace. No, not MySpace. MySpace isn't around anymore, I don't think. But thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it, Paul. Thanks again. And of course, as we always say, Skol.